Okay, it's time for another video. It's been about a week since I did my last one. Once again, I'm just going to hint at this idea that there's a bigger topic for me on a personal level that I really want to address. There's some other topics that are personal that I'm also considering addressing. I spoke once already about my grandmother's funeral back in the beginning of May, and how Governor Tim Walz's draconian measures and restrictions put in place supposedly for the sake of the safety and health of the people of Minnesota really impacted what should have been a close family time. I will be speaking about that in the future, juxtaposing that against let's say a more famous funeral and memorial service that recently took place here in the last few weeks. It's probably going to be a hot button issue. I'm okay with that. I'm alright if it draws the ire of a few people. Well, I also want to talk a little bit about the city of Rochester, the city council and the mayor making a decision that anywhere within city buildings, people have to be masked, and that any indoor business that cannot accommodate social distancing, everyone inside must be masked. I've already done a video about whether or not you can be ordered to wear a mask, period. I really want to address this again, but today in this video I want to address the idea of societal pressure and mask shaming. We're seeing it all over. There are different counties, there are different government entities that are really effectively shaming their employees into wearing masks, not while they're working, but actually at home and when they're out and about in public. The reason that I say that is I've talked to people who have experienced this, where people are pleading with one another, you know, show us pictures of your family wearing a mask and why you wear a mask and why it's important to you and why you would want others to do it. And this is happening all over, not just the state of Minnesota, but happening all over the country, where government employees are really receiving a lot of pressure to modify their lives on their personal time. And that's being brought to bear on them while they're working. So, but I'm going to be talking in particular, speaking in particular tonight to an opinion piece that was written by a man named Tyler Cowen. He is an economist of sorts. I shouldn't say of sorts. He's clearly an economist. Everything I've been able to garner on him is that he's a libertarian, and I will say of sorts in my commentary here, because the opinion piece, this essay that he published just a few days ago, does not appear libertarian in its nature, and in fact it's actually pretty heavy-handed. It almost comes off as very it's very much virtue signaling, and it's also very much an issue of social, it's kind of a social Marxist heavy, you should be doing this because society says you should be doing this. And I'm not going to go too much further into that part of the commentary until I've actually read a little bit of what he has to say. One of the terms that he used in the title of his opinion piece, his essay, are Americans are failing the mask test. So Tyler opens his essay here and he says, I sometimes refer to the COVID-19 pandemic as the great psychometric test. We are all being placed under different kinds of strain, and we have the chance to react for better or worse. Now, that opening line in and of itself doesn't necessarily belie his position. It sounds like he could go either way. But what I will tell you is that that statement, to react for better or worse, is he already has in mind what a worse reaction is and what a better reaction is. And he doesn't take long getting into this essay to reveal himself. He starts off the second paragraph, he says, one set of tests has concerned masks. There is an increasing evidence that masks stem the spread of the virus. No, there isn't. Yet the U.S. is not embracing mask wearing, so he doesn't take long. It is the only major nation that has turned masks into a partisan political issue. That is a psychometric test for this country, and we are failing it. Period. Out of the gate, bam, he's already made it clear. Everyone should be wearing a mask. So let's deal with this topic of psychometric tests, and I'm going to be very brief on this. Psychometric tests are, you'll see these often for employment. It's a kind of an aptitude / intelligence test that employers will use to ascertain the ability of a person to work in the environment that the employer is seeking to employ them in. And really what it comes down to, when he says this is a psychometric test for the American people, for the nation, is he's basically saying, like, you're sitting here, you're about to take this psychometric test, and the way you react is going to judge or gauge the level of your intelligence. And his conclusion is that your refusal to wear a mask, or any resistance to wearing a mask, or any questions about the legality or even the effectual nature of wearing a mask is to call into question your intelligence. That's what he means by this being a psychometric test. He literally is stating that if you have any position other than his that doesn't line up with the prevailing wisdom of the day, coming from all sorts of experts, and I would use scare quotes there, if you disagree, your intelligence should be called into question. So what he goes on to say, the next test, I think, will be which institutions can succeed at getting Americans to wear their masks. That in turn will be a test of which institutions Americans truly trust, or at least are willing to defer to. So he goes on, so far it doesn't seem that our public health authorities are going to take that crown. Well, have our public health authorities really given us a reason to trust them, Tyler? I mean, let's just be honest. The CDC has been all over the place, WHO, which is not one of our public health authorities. None of them are on the same page for maybe more than 15 minutes at the most. So he goes on, no systematic data are available. There might be a reason for that. But in my home area, Fairfax County, a Virginia suburb of Washington, D.C., mask wearing seemed much more common a few weeks ago than it is today. Where I go and what I see is obviously not a scientific sample. I'm glad he introduced that. But of course, what I should be seeing is mask wearing rising visibly and sharply approaching near universality. So this is his opinion, and he's trying to make it sound like fact. But this is just his opinion, and he admits that to some degree, but he's also very adamant that his opinion is the only right one. That is not the case, and by no means is it only Trump supporters who are failing to respect appropriate mask norms. How do we even know what an appropriate mask norm is right now, Tyler? Because this is new for our nation. So how can we say what an appropriate mask norm is? Especially when we have some municipalities and some states and some counties and regions that are saying, okay, everybody has to wear a mask when they're outside, period. When they're not in their home, they have to wear a mask. I've heard tell of states or certain areas that say if you're in your own yard, you need to have a mask on. If you're outside of your house, have a mask on. Now, I don't know if that's true, but these are reports that I'm receiving. And then they'll say things like, well, everybody has to wear a mask except for people 2 and under, or 6 and under, or 8 and under. And you have to wear a mask unless you have a compelling medical reason not to wear a mask. So what's the norm, Tyler? And you use that term very intentionally. So he goes on. And by no means is it only Trump supporters who are failing to respect appropriate mask norms. Fairfax County went heavily for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump in 2016. Well, yeah, come on. Gee-manies, if anybody should be wearing masks, it should be the Hillary Clinton supporters. I agree with that because leftist Democrats these days tend to be pretty much automatons who want to be one with the Borg and will do anything they're told to do as long as it's being told to them by someone in a position of power, unless that person happens to be a conservative. If public health authorities have not been able to encourage mask wearing among the general public, are there institutions that have succeeded in doing so on their own patch? One example might come from reopening universities. I suspect that mask wearing will be a sustainable norm in any classroom that requires it, if only because a professor can observe norm violators and ask them to leave. Hear that? Norm. If you don't do the norm, we're going to get rid of you. Get out of our class. The professors will have an interest in enforcing this policy, and most academics lean to the left. Yep. Largely inoculating them from the anti-mask rhetoric and behavior of President Donald Trump. So this guy is, he's not a libertarian. Let's just be honest. He's a leftist, masquerading as a libertarian, according to other people. And he's pro-mask all the way. Like, he's right here. He's all for shaming people into wearing a mask. Like, especially at the university. If you're not going to wear a mask in my class, you're going to get kicked out. And well, what happens if you get kicked out of a university? You're going to lose your scholarships, maybe, because you're not attending class. You're going to get a failing grade in that class, and on and on and on. So, like, he's all for penalties. Penalties. Let's just be honest. That's what he's indicating here. He's for penalties. Now, why is this important to Minnesota? Well, this is published in several Minnesota newspapers. One of them, the Rochester Post Bulletin. And this is happening across the country. People are taking the chance to write essays and opinion pieces like this, and they're being, just advanced. They're being flooded out into society and into communities all over. The masks are the thing. Like, this is the norm for him now. He's established this as a norm. It's not a norm. It is not a norm. But he's established this as a norm. He thinks it should be the norm, and he wants to see pressure brought to bear on people. And this is now, just remember, this got published over the weekend in the Rochester Post Bulletin, and now on Monday, the Rochester City Council is now moving to make masks mandatory. This is not a game. He's a pawn. He's a tool of the leftist progressives. And if you write an anti-mask opinion piece or essay, you're probably not going to get published right now, unless you happen to find a conservative or a traditionalist news agency, or publishing platform that will publish for you. So here he goes on. Still, I doubt that it will be possible to enforce the norm of mask wearing in dorms and other common spaces. After all, universities have not succeeded. Sorry, my computer jumped. Universities have not succeeded in stamping out drug and alcohol abuse on campus, or for that matter, enforcing class attendance or homework requirements. Now, this sounds really, like, yeah, he's got a point. No, listen to how he's comparing this. This is a very calculated comparison. He just made mask wearing the same as drug and alcohol abuse. So, like, if you refuse to wear a mask, you might as well be abusing illegal drugs and abusing alcohol in the dorms. That is a terrible correlation for any person to make. Like, that's just, it's beyond the pale. And there again, this is a leftist tool. You take something that society doesn't do now, you make it the norm, and you compare it to something that society should have a prevailing aversion to. Illegal drug use, we should be averse to that. Drug and alcohol abuse, we should be averse to that. Not wearing a mask is the same as drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and that's terrible. This is how this is going to happen, people. You need to understand this. This is what they're going to do. This is gaslighting at its best. This is a perfect, terrible example of gaslighting. Don't wear your mask. You might as well be doing heroin and getting drunk in the dorms at the university level. So here's another one. Another hope on the mask wearing front is American business and the American workplace. I am struck by how every package delivery person I have seen, and these days that is many, is wearing some kind of mask, even though they are out on the road away from their bosses and not usually coming into much close contact with their package receiving customers. Okay, maybe these people are kowtowed and they're terrified that if anybody reports that they're not wearing a mask, they're going to lose their job. They're not doing this. A lot of these guys are not doing this out of willingness. They're doing this because we're being encouraged to rat one another out in our current climate. So if the delivery driver shows up at your door and he's not wearing a mask, and you have video of that, or you have a photograph of that, some sort of proof of that, and you report it to his employer, he could lose his job. This has got nothing to do with willing compliance, and it's everything to do with, I'm afraid of losing my income, so I'm going to wear my mask even when I don't have to because nobody's watching. Because we've turned our country into a nation of leftist Karens. Totalitarian snitches is what we've become. We've become a country of totalitarian snitches. This is right out of the Soviet Union Marxist playbook. This is right out of the Nazi playbook. This is right out of the French Revolution playbook. Like, tell on people around you for not doing the right thing. Do not dare enter into a place of wrong think. Because if you even demonstrate a smidgen of wrong think, we will have your head. We will put you in a gulag. And that's what he's advocating for. Here's the other one. The other workers I see, such as waiters or retail clerks, also are wearing their masks pretty much universally, even during my recent West Virginia and Ohio road trip, a region where otherwise mask wearing was very low. Boy, this is a loaded, clearly, people in this region are not wearing their mask, and these retail employees, they're much better than the average person because they're wearing masks like they should be. Well, there again, their employers are probably making them. Most employers these days are telling their staff, you will wear a mask. Whether you like it or not, you're going to wear a mask. And so people are putting a mask on to go to work out of fear of losing their job. Because employers now made this a fireable offense. I need a drink. And so he goes on and even says this. Of course, compelling workers to wear masks is one thing. Asking customers to do so is quite another. AMC movie theaters will be reopening in mid-July, and they have now decided all customers will have to wear masks. That will perhaps be the acid test for how much Americans respect businesses as a source of authority, because movie theaters are relatively dark, and ushers, to the extent they still exist, may be reluctant to interrupt movies to enforce mask wearing. Private businesses are not an authority. Like, they're their own boss, if you will, but they're not an authority. And they don't have authority over me. Now, they can say, we won't let you in here. They should have the right to refuse business to anyone. A business should have the right to refuse business to anyone. A gay-owned business, if they find out that a person is a dyed-in-the-wool Christian who has an aversion to homosexual lifestyle, and they want to come in and do business with this gay-owned business, that business owner should be able to refuse to do business with him. Just like a gay person should not be able to force a baker or a flower shop or a Christian bookstore to hire them or do business with them. So business has authority over itself, but it does not have authority over the individual. And so if they say, you will wear a mask while you're in here, that person can choose to do business with them or not. But what he's saying is that people need to bow the knee to private business as an authority. I mean, that's what he said. Period. So he goes on. It is a common occurrence in stores that customers are rebelling against mask wearing and store employees are having to enforce the norm, albeit with great difficulties. There again, notice that? Enforce the norm. He's working to establish that mask wearing is normative, and it's not, and nor should it be, because wearing a mask has proven to have no effect on people's health at all. At all. There again, most of the masks that are being worn don't do what people think they should do. And there again, in the video that I did about wearing masks in the state of Minnesota, our own governor has stated in different ways, but very clearly in one statement, in one particular case, he realizes that masks, this is Governor Tim Walz, do not have the effect that they are trying to get us to believe they do, but it's being done for an emotional or psychological benefit to other people. This man, Tyler Cowen, wants us to believe that mask wearing is normative now. And it's not. It's not normative. This has been going on since the middle of March. There's no way you can make this normative. And the American people, and there was a case here just recently in a city in Florida where the American people, the people of this town went in and established for themselves the authority to tell the mayor to shove off. And so the city council overrode the mayor's edict. And the people of the city aren't going to follow the rules, and the city council said, we're not backing the mayor up on this. So, and that's the way it should be, quite frankly. And store employees and businesses shouldn't be establishing what the norm is for us. The norm should be determined by the American people. If people want to wear a mask, let them wear a mask. If people don't want to wear a mask, they shouldn't have to. Any more than we should be able to force immunizations on people. He goes on, and there's only a couple of paragraphs left. For an example of how difficult it is to corral customer behavior, consider one librarian's account of reopening her public library in Florida. Once inside the building, many patrons took off or pulled down their masks. Despite instructions to the contrary, visitors would crowd next to each other near the chairs or the computers, including at computers that were explicitly designated as not working. The staff, already tasked with extra responsibility, rapidly became exhausted. And of course, trying to enforce the rules brought them into a closer contact with the patrons, creating yet further sources of risk. The willingness of the Trump administration to discourage and even mock mask wearing is an unforgivable mistake. Okay, and there it is. Mask wearing is righteousness. Not wearing your mask is a sin. This is the religion of the left, people. We're going to establish for you how you should behave, and if you deviate from that, you are a sinner. This is no different than the original sin of the Black Lives Matter movement, which says being white is your original sin. White privilege is your sin. In this particular case, mask wearing is righteousness. Not wearing a mask is unrighteous, and you are a horrible sinner, and you are in need of salvation by the means the state has appropriated for you. The state has secured for you what it means to be righteous and how to be saved, and that is to demonstrate your subservience to the state by bowing the knee to governing authorities who can't even get on the same page most of the time. I'm going to read that paragraph again. The willingness of the Trump administration to discourage and even mock mask wearing is an unforgivable mistake. But it is also reflecting a broader problem with American society, namely a vacuum of trust and moral authority across many different domains. As a nation, we desperately need to realize that we are failing this test. And that's it right there, people. That's mask shaming. That is societal pressure being brought to bear on people for doing something that other people think you should be doing right now. If you refuse to wear a mask in public, in a store, or in a restaurant, or any other place where you may be around people, you are committing an unforgivable sin. And he used the word mistake here, but it's not a mistake. They see it as a sin. And you can already see this in a lot of places where people, especially in the Rochester area, around the home of the Mayo Clinic, you are a wretch of a person if you don't wear a mask. I have personally experienced this from people, One lady at one point even made a comment like, "Why aren't you wearing a mask?" Listen, lady, why are you wearing one? These are the same people that if they see you have a firearm will just absolutely freak out because you happen to have a firearm in public. It doesn't matter whether or not you're permitted. Let's not even get into the idea of having to have a permit to exercise your Second Amendment rights. But they're the same people that freak out. And I mean, I've actually had people go, "You have a gun." I've actually observed as people go, "That guy over there has a gun." Yeah, I've got a gun. Because I want what's safe for you. And that means if somebody comes in and they open fire, I'll be the person running to your rescue while everybody else is cowering on the floor and dying. So you putting pressure on me to wear a mask would be tantamount to me coming in and going, "Why aren't you carrying a gun?" Well, you don't want to carry a gun because you're not comfortable with it, and that's fine. Nor should I be forced to wear a mask in public for your mental health. Let's just be honest, it's for your mental health, for your emotional health, for your psychology. But that's what this is. Mask wearing is being turned into the great moral issue, and it's ranking right up there with the leftists. Like it's like, here we have mask wearing and confessing your white privilege. And I know these things don't seem connected, but they're all coming together right now. Societal pressure is coming here. Wear a mask, confess your white privilege. And that, obviously, minorities who don't agree with white privilege as far as it being a reality don't really fall into this because they don't need to confess it, but they need to confess that they're sellouts. So here's all this pressure. Wear a mask, and bow the knee to the societal pressure of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is, by the way, a Marxist organization, has no desire to save black people at all. What we're dealing with is a new religion. This is a new religion, folks. This leftist, progressive, Marxist, Gramscian Marxism mentality of societal pressure being brought to bear to manipulate and get people to do what the state deems they need to do, what the left deems they need to do. That's what's happening here. Bow the knee to the new religion of the left. Wear a mask, or whatever else they tell you should be doing. Repent of the great sin of your rebellion against mask wearing. Repent of the great sin of being whatever is now the norm, or it's okay to attack. People we need to resist. White, black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever mix of ethnicity that you might be, you need to resist. Do not let society tell you that wearing a mask is righteous and that not wearing a mask is the great sin. The state is not your savior, and it cannot be. The only thing the state can do is imprison you and control you. And we're exchanging one form of, if you will, one form of systematic slavery for another form of systematic slavery. And this is a systematic slavery of societal pressure to wear masks. Systematic slavery of mask wearing. Do as you are told, or you will be called out for your sin. This must end. The people of America need to rise up and say, enough is enough. You are not going to control me. You are not going to shame me. It needs to stop. And it needs to start stopping. The end needs to be here in Minnesota. The people of Minnesota, the citizens of Minnesota, the level-headed, reasonable traditionalists of Minnesota need to stop what's happening and say enough is enough. We need to put the governing authorities in a position where they have to determine whether or not they're going to order people in the positions of law enforcement capabilities and whatnot. We need to put them in a position where they're going to have to determine, are they going to order their officers to start arresting people, to start writing people tickets? Because that's the only way they're going to be able to enforce this. They're going to have to bring the force of law down on people. And we need to dare them to do that. We need to dare them to do that. Right now, they need to be told, if you want to enforce this, make it illegal to not wear a mask where we tell you to wear a mask. Write me a ticket. Threaten me with a fine. Put me in jail. That's what needs to happen. because I will tell you, the American people won't tolerate it, and the vast majority of people in law enforcement will not do it. This stuff needs to end. No more mask shaming, no more societal pressure, no more calling this the norm, no more calling this normative. We need to reject the tyranny of our overlords. We need to reject the systematic slavery of mask wearing. Because that's what it is. This is the new slavery. Do this or you will have no economic freedom. It needs to stop. As always, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for being open-minded. Thanks for listening. I would ask that over here in the corner, somewhere on your screen, you hit the subscribe button. It's important, not for me, but because mainstream media, legacy media, isn't going to get the word out. They're not going to let people who don't toe the established line speak. So for the sake of liberty and for the sake of the defense of this nation, small little independent voices like mine need to be heard, especially the interviews. It's got very little to do with my commentary and a lot more to do with the interviews and the people who are affected when liberties are tread on. So once again, hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.